Hello, listeners, and welcome to the latest episode of the AdQuick Advertising Podcast, a podcast that explores the intersection of tech, creativity, advertising, all of the things that you care about. Today, we have a special guest. We have Trung back on the pod for his second appearance.
Repeat.
He is, I'm pretty sure Trung's original episode is our number one listened to podcast so far. So, of course, we have to invite him back. He's a fan favorite.
Dude, the bar's high now, man. If I don't reach like top 30, I'm never coming back on. I'm not top 30. I'm never coming back on.
I think you were like in like the first maybe 10 episodes, and this is probably.
I think it was the first one of the first. Well, you'd messages like, "Hey, we're starting a podcast." Like, come on, I'm like, dude, of course, man. I'll come hang with Adam.
So I think this is like episode 65 or 66. I mean, I could hold you to be episode 69, but we won't do that.
We'll just label it 69.
Yeah, and then just backfill the others, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So Trung, we talk online about a lot of stuff all day.
Yeah.
So I thought this conversation could let's just start with something fun happening right now, because I actually think you'll have a cool take on this. Have you seen the meme of could the 100 men beat one gorilla?
Oh, the Mr. Beast.
Well, he also did a meme on it, but some guy just tweeted, who would win in a fight, one gorilla or 100 men, and it spawned like all of these viral comments and memes.
Oh, wait. I missed that. I thought Mr. Beast was actually doing
no. So anyway, it's really funny. This whole meme caught on, and it kind of reminds me of remember the old Reddit thread or the old Reddit meme? Would you rather fight one horse-sized duck or 100 duck-sized horses? You remember that? And then there's also the other meme of like the image where it's like, would you pick 3, the rest are coming to get you, or it's like a guy with the gun, it's like a bunch of alligators, it's like a bunch of bears. Have you seen that?
I've seen some variations of what you're describing.
Yeah. So anyway, the 100 men, one gorilla thing is like, I feel like the internet is obsessed with any sort of thought experiment where there's like some level of stakes involved, like high stakes, like,
You mean life or death? Like,
yeah, life or death, or financial stakes, or
yeah.
The other thing of like, would you rather be in a room alone for 100 days or get like, 10 million, or to get $10 million or something else, right? And I feel like the internet's obsessed with these comparisons. And it's one of those things that I don't think like you or a brand can engineer. I think it just happens organically because it's always just the original guy who shared the, one gorilla 100 men thing has like 2,000 followers, and he's just some bro, and he's got like a great avatar of just like some guy who took a selfie who's like, not professional, not serious, not even in like an NFT avatar. He's just like some shit poster, right?
Well, I'm gonna do a little bit of pushback, Adam, because I know listeners enjoy a little bit of pushback. I would say Mr. Beast actually engineers all these, right? Everything you described is basically an episode of a Mr. Beast YouTube challenge, right? And I think you nailed it. I think he realized how much these challenges are internet, like you said, like just internet native insanity, right? People love these hypotheticals. I'll tell you the thing that when you're explaining to me the 100 gorillas and versus one man, or the reverse, 100 gorillas versus one man, that would not be a very fair fight. But no, you know what I thought about is, you remember Quora before it went absolutely insane? It was like all AI slop.
Yeah.
It used to have the funniest questions. It was all hey, what would happen if 4 Navy SEALs were dropped in 5 BC Roman Empire time? Could they take over the empire? There's so many variations of that, like 16 Marines against 1,000 Mongols. That's my favorite variation of what you're describing. And Quora has so many of them. A running joke I had was, a running joke that nobody else found funny but me, was that if we ever invented a time machine, Quora's valuation would hit $1 trillion, because it just has so much information on how to take out militaries from different ages. And so that is the go-to source for that.
Yeah. And it almost feels like there's even more to this human behavior, because like the comparison thing and it is almost embedded in a lot of these viral games, like the, Cards Against Humanity and these kind of trivia games that like to compare things. And then also for comparison, we have Charlie Munger says things like comparison is a thief of joy. Comparison is, the driver of FOMO that either causes you to work hard or causes you to just like be upset and jealous. And I feel like this is like one of like the major drivers of not just virility, but like everyone's motivation. It's
not just virility. I like how you went straight to virility and then, you're going evolutionary roots here, right?
Yeah, it's really funny. And like, I find personally, like I like the Charlie Munger thing where I try to like reduce my comparison to things. Like I don't use Instagram because I'm going to see people in like fancy cars and nicer houses. And, you shouldn't care about that anyway. But if you see it long enough, you're like, oh, like I kind of want that. And if you never see it, you just don't want it and your life is great. So as a marketer, I'm like I try to like anti-market myself and try to like not get drawn into all of that stuff. But I still think the thought experiments are fun.
Have you guys done a billboard for one of these before? And if not, will you be doing one?
Mr. Beast does billboards. I don't
know.
He
does billboards like this?
Well, no, he does billboards for his show. So in like some of his episodes, he actually uses billboards as like part of the like either for a native ad for a company. Like I think in the one where he was on the water for some reason, he had an ad on a billboard, like a boat billboard, because why not? So he uses out of home, cut pretty creatively.
Dude, I love me some OOH. How much OOH? Like, I got a question for you. This is a bit meta. How much OOH do you guys would you say across your 65 episodes? What percentage of those episodes in total is OOH content? Out of home content.
Probably like 5%. But the thing is if you're a marketer, you're interested in hearing the perspectives of other marketers. And I actually think if you work at an ad tech company, like talking about your platform all day isn't that interesting. I think it's interesting if you talk about ideas and concepts and creativity, because all of that is going to go through your platform anyway. And I think from like a marketing perspective, if you're working at a SaaS firm and you want to run a podcast, well, who's going to trust you at the end of the day? They can go and get a demo of your software and see that works. But I think the thing that they're looking for is your team comprised of people who are trustworthy, who are passionate, who really want to make sure their users get the most out of the platform? Because at the end of the day, it's like, it's not the tools, it's really how you use them. And that comes from really nurturing a great creative space. And we try to help just a little bit by having conversations with people in the industry.
Do you guys help with creative a lot, or they come with the creative, your customers?
It's a great question. Usually users come to us with their creative in mind. They have creative agencies and, creative directors in-house, and we basically just provide the platform so they can have a canvas for their ads. But for some teams, for some startups where they're very early or they want creative help, we can help them with that too.
I love it. All right, let's get into the list that you were mentioning.
So I had a bunch of topics for you. I'm Trung's #1 fan. Every Saturday morning, I wake up with coffee and I always read his blog posts. If you don't read his blog, I'm sure you do if you're listening to this, but he writes every Sunday, which is cool because I know I'm going to get something every week. And so the one I want to start talking about first is the psychology of gambling. And I think your post title was The Ludicrous Psychology of Slot Machines. Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's right. I love that you brought this one up.
And so let's go through a few things. Just the overview of the post, how social media companies do the same things, some of the psychology casinos, and like what this says about humanity. So let's start with the overview of like what you wrote.
No, yeah. So let me just do the 50,000 foot, and you airdrop any point where you're like, oh, this part was dumb or this part I actually kind of liked. No, the reason I wrote is because I'd gone to Las Vegas probably 3 weeks ago, and I went specifically, which is something I wanted to ask you about. I went specifically because my kid wanted to see the Sphere, and I know the Sphere is like like whenever you talk to an out of home person and you bring up the Sphere, do boners come up? Is that right or wrong?
It is correct. And you can buy the Sphere in AdQuick. We have a partnership with them.
And I know, actually, I think you told me that you guys also do the Luxor. Did you guys do the Luxor look like a big Dorito? Because that was amazing.
I don't know if that was our software, but you can buy Luxor in the product. Trunk, do you know how much the Sphere is for like 4 hours?
I think I saw the number. Is it it's 6 figures? Is it not?
Yeah, it's almost 7.
Oh, how much is it?
I mean, It's going to be around 700,000 for that. 600
for
700.
4 hours.
Yeah, and you could probably work out some deals if you wanted to do more. But
Wait,
yeah,
for a single day.
yeah,
Oh, yo, that's crazy.
it's prime real estate.
Wait, Adam, before I talk about the ludicrous psychology of slot machines, let me just say, you want to know what I saw when I went? Monday.com. The software service was advertised. It wasn't 4 hours though. It was like a 30-second spot. I don't know what that cost, but I can imagine extrapolating downwards from the 7,000 wasn't cheap. But Adam, let's talk about the out of home Las Vegas shortly, because I actually have a lot of questions about it, and I know you have the answers. So so went to see the Sphere, but the premise of the article is just about the slot machine industry. And there's an incredible book which I think is so relevant for your audience, is Addiction by Design. It's I'm going to butcher the author's name, so I'm not even going to do it. I apologize, but Addiction by Design. Please go find it on Amazon or put it in the links. She's an anthropologist, so she wrote about slot machines from the perspective of anthropology, and her point was twofold. There's like the psychology element and the history element. So the history element is actually very interesting. So if you actually look at old photos of Frank Sinatra, who's the most relevant person in the founding of Vegas, when you see photos of him in Vegas, he's not playing slots, right? He's playing craps, he's playing blackjack, he's playing quote unquote the manly games. That's how they described it in the 50s and 60s. But it was actually the female companions would be playing these slot machines, these one-armed bandits that were founded in San Francisco in actually the 1890s. Just like kind of the gold rush mentality. So these slot machines, as the ones that I think the one that everybody visualizes has got the one arm and the 3 sevens or the cherries, right? It's like that's the visualization of how slot machines were. And that's how it was for like 80 years. But then fast forward to the 1970s and slot machines, the Las Vegas becoming more popular. Gaming in Las Vegas in the 70s made up about 75% of a casino's revenue. Today in 2025, it only makes up 25%. The balance is made up by, the rooms, entertainment, and getting your face ripped off by like $15 like coconut waters and $5 bananas. So like the Las Vegas went from gaming, as so many people will know, to more the resort side, right? Like the resort casino. That's what they're called. It's like the resort now makes up the majority of the revenue. So are we on the same page with that? Have you experienced that recently?
Yeah, and actually the resort pricing side is interesting because I once took a picture of the prices of chicken fingers at the Wynn, and it actually went pretty viral. Because it was like, but I did this a little bit. It's expensive, but I took a photo of like the platter of like 50 chicken wings, and it was like, $500.
And you just called it, like, people thought it'd be like 3 or 4 wings, right? Like that's what the mentally is in their head.
Right. But I didn't say that. I'm just like, you can buy like this, like $500 worth of chicken wings.
Well, there you go. There's Adam giving some alpha on how to go viral. Don't necessarily tell everything.
No one reads. But as you were talking, another thing I was thinking about with the one-armed slot machines, because they don't really have those anymore. Now it's all buttons. But growing up, I remember at the arcade for kids, they have that pull slot machines where you could win tickets for prizes. And it's kind of evil that they have kids playing slot machines for private prizes. You're basically teaching them,
you're training
like
them,
the habit
100%.
of gambling. Like as a kid, I don't know. It's kind of like if we're gonna do that, I guess we should still bring back like candy cigarettes, because like if you're gonna do it, just allow everything. But it's weird, like there's no more candy cigarettes anymore, but you can still play the fake slot machines, like
which can be just as devastating if you go down, sadly, the wrong path, right? Which is like a lot about this Addiction by Design book is like, so like if we just talk about the revenue split, which you just described, like the $500 platter of wings is kind of perfect, right? That's just like, that's what Las Vegas is now. It's like, that's how they make most of their money. But like the way that transition happened, it's funny you brought up kids and games, is like, so Nintendo in the 80s became a really big thing, right? And then these digital interfaces, you have Atari, but turning games into visuals on like TV screens, that was actually a big reason how slots, as you had mentioned, went from the one arm to the digital, because they just rode that wave. But a big part of that, so there's a technology side of it in the 80s, but the other side of it, which is also quite evil, I say not evil, but diabolical in a way, was is a lot of states realized that they didn't have any money. They're like, how do we raise money, right? It's like, well, we have the lottery, we have the state lotteries. What about slot machines? Can we just put slot machines everywhere? So 44 of the 50 states now have legislation allowing slot machines. And slot machines is literally, they're just as bad as lotteries, right? They're probably in the same way a regressive tax because the lower income sections of society are spending more as a percentage of their income on these games than they should be. But so in the 80s, it rode both of these waves, right? Actually, the third wave was social. It was coded as female, right? Slot machines. So when the states started being like, hey, let's raise revenue with slot machines, it didn't come off as negative. It was like, oh, look at this game that grandmas and like moms play, right? It's like, how bad could this possibly be? And that's when they renamed it from gambling to gaming, which, dude, come on. As a marketing guy, let me ask you, how crazy is that as a reframe? Calling gambling, slot machines and the entire industry gambling to gaming? That is some devious stuff, man.
Yeah. There's a Simpsons joke about that too, years
Oh,
ago.
is there?
In the 90s, yeah. Where, I think Homer or Marge is gambling and they say keep gaming, it means gambling, like over the loudspeaker.
Dude, I gotta find it. They nailed it, right? So the Simpsons got it. So there goes that 40-year transformation basically happened to where we are today. And you talked about it. All these machines now are all digital, and we can talk about the design of them shortly. But the casino revenues now, if you look at just the gaming portion, which is now smaller as we had talked about. So let's say that Nevada does 80 bill a year across the casino resorts. So 25% of that now is in gaming. So that's about 15-ish, maybe. Yeah, a ballpark. Matt, don't check the numbers is what I'm saying. I know this for sure. 15 bill last year was gaming casino revenue, and 10 billion of that numbers was 70% was slot machines. So if you thought that slot machines were just like a sideshow, you never really thought about it, slot machines make more money than every other casino game combined across the board. It's not even close.
Yeah, and that's actually my least favorite thing to do in a casino. I'm a poker guy. I like to sit in the poker room and, play a tournament. And it's more fun because you spend like the $200 fee to be part of the tournament. And then your losses are constrained to that fee. And it's almost like it's almost like a chess tournament or something. It's more of like this intellectual puzzle.
And it's social.
And it's social too.
Yeah.
So you're right. Like the slot machines being like this addictive thing for kind of retired people is a little bit diabolical. Whereas like, poker games are classic male and female bonding. There's
it's much more different now, right? I'm talking when I said like male coded, that was very like Sinatra in the 50s and 60s. Yeah. So like, and you kind of nailed on. I think the social part is really important. Is like slots are so isolating, right? And that's the point. Is like so let's talk about the design a bit, how they designed the casinos for the slot machines. A couple of things that jumped out, and this is not across the board, but this is from the study. So the author of the Addicted by Design, like she had just interviewed like the experts in the industry, and they're like, a couple of things jumped out at me that were just like, oh my God, I got, right? The obvious ones that everybody knows is like there's no natural light, right? And there's no clocks. It's like that's standard. Most people know that one. The other one that really I hadn't realized was they specifically don't like 90-degree turns. They like curved routes because they figured out that if people have to make a 90-degree turn, that means they're actually stopping and like looking which way to go. And that little friction might be enough to be like, I don't think I should be gambling right now. Whereas if you're just on curved routes and it just really never gives you a chance to stop, you're just walking yourself to a machine. And then once you get to a machine, and this goes to the point you had made about the slot arms versus digital, like speed is the main thing with slots, right? Like every other gambling game has some form of friction. Blackjack, you have to deal, you have to reshuffle. Craps, you got to wait for somebody to roll the dice, do their whole routine. Actually, let me stop on that. Do you ever play craps, and what's your routine with the dice?
I'm just a blackjack and poker guy.
Okay, you're not a craps guy?
No.
All right.
But an interesting anecdote to add, though, about table games is I'm friendly with the guy who was director of BI at Caesars. Okay. And they know the price elasticity of table games at a given hour of the day. And so they have a whole data science team that tells them
incredible
actually change the price of those, of the minimum blackjack bets, right?
Right.
They've got a whole data science team behind that as well.
Well, to your point,
It's way
I was
less
gonna say-
nefarious. It's just supply and demand.
No, what I was gonna say though is like to your point, the elasticity, 2 a.m. everybody's hammered. They're gonna turn the minimum a bit up, right? It's like or make it go down. Make the minimum. Probably want to reduce the minimum if people are hammered, just so like they reduce all their inhibitions, right? Just tossing. That's what I imagine. You should ask your BI buddy about that from Caesars. But no, I love that you brought that up because you're right. It's all. They have it literally down to science, right? It's like they run these numbers and it's just like they know exactly the music. They know what music to play at what time of day to get people's heartbeats going at a certain rate. It's like they do the craziest stuff, right? I heard a lot of Coldplay for some reason, so maybe Coldplay is really like coded for people for regulars to gamble.
I don't know the answer to that.
Well, you're a big music guy. How do you feel about that?
You don't want my opinions on Vegas music. Like Vegas EDM is like a joke with like the real heads in the electronic music scene.
Right.
It's like, kind of the stuff that people who don't listen to electronic music usually will listen to what they play in Vegas. It's like none of the people who are really into the scene like the Vegas club scene. But that's like, what? It's fine for tourists. And I always think it's good to get people interested in the art form. So if you have a great night out in Vegas, it's kind of like a gateway drug to be like, oh, like I should seek out more of this music. So I'm not someone who's a hater on like the Vegas electronic music.
Fair enough. But like back to the music with the slots specifically is like we had talked about the social media design. I mean, every app now just took the lessons from slot machines, right? The number one lesson was like variable rewards. Like most people are probably familiar with the BF Skinner study with the rat that would just would basically kill itself getting variable rewards of cocaine. And that basically informed the slot industry. BF Skinner, the psychologist, actually later in life said, oh man, I realized that the casino industry took my research and like applied it to their games. Is like, I'm really not happy about that. He's like, that's very unfortunate.
It's really interesting that you mentioned slots and social isolation because I recall there was a study with rats and cocaine, and it turns out when you have the rat alone, it does a lot of cocaine. But then if you have the rat socialized with a lot of other people, it stops being interested in that. So it's like, to your point about being alone, addicted to this thing, it's like that's the mind space you would be in to act compulsively and probably stay at that machine.
Well, yeah, we should dig into that a bit, and like obviously not medical or scientific advice, but like I think anecdotally, if you're thinking about it, is like anything that introduces friction, right? Literally, another person would introduce friction. You got to talk to them, or you got to be aware that they might be looking at you being really degen and like have feel bad about that. But like these machines, even the way they build them is they put them in. They're in the open floor, but they're meant to be structured in such a way where you can still feel individual. And the way they used to do that was that they would just pile machines everywhere. So they found that if you put so many machines everywhere and everybody just kind of sat there, everyone would just kind of intuitively build their own cubicles in their mind, right? But when that didn't work, they'd literally just build like hoods over it, conclaves over it, and like you kind of sit down and it feels very like no one's around you, which is it's straight. If you ever sit at a slot machine, you realize it's like the way it's designed and how you visually you look at the screen, you will not actually notice things around you once you start getting into it.
It's very American too to build this sort of atomized situation in public. There's a whole book on that, Bowling Alone, right? So I don't necessarily love that trend. It's of all the things you could do in Vegas, it's like you should be there to be social, right?
Which is good. I mean, in that respect, the shift from going to more gambling centric to more resort centric is a positive in that light, right? That is a positive, and people are spending more time. And they've changed the floor to have the games in a more the big ones like if you go to Bellagio or Wynn, they'll have more social slots. But the point remains the way that they've designed is to extract money from people. And even Nevada has a minimum, right? You have to pay out 75 cents to the dollar. And this is actually the running joke I had in there was that's why the slots, we can end on this part, but the slots at the airport at Harry Reid International are the least fair slots in all of Vegas because they don't need those players coming back. It's like idiot tourists like me, right? So they're like, so they keep it at a minimum. Those slots are 75 cents to the dollar on the dot. Whereas if you go to the Wynn or Bellagio, they'll pay out 90 cents on the dollar because they want the locals to keep coming back.
That makes sense. Related to the airport slots, I love that scene in Ocean's 13 where the guy that they were the critic of the hotels that they were trolling the whole movie, they set up to win the jackpot at the airport at the end.
Yeah.
That was fun.
No, that was a great payoff, right?
Yeah.
But no, I didn't have any other thoughts on the slot stuff. I'd love to talk about the out of home actually, Las Vegas. Dude, let me just ask you straight up. It's like, is Las Vegas like the platinum for out of home, or is that just because of me?
Las Vegas and New York are like
Times Square and Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Those command the highest prices.
If you're a big brand, you want to, and you're launching something new, or you're just doing branding effort, I don't see how you don't include both places.
So is it because is the understanding with Las Vegas is that because it gets someone in and out, just like the volume of people coming into that area?
Yeah, and the reason you want those two locations, you want other locations too. There's much better deals, but okay. So out of home ads are really the only ads that people actually take a photo with their cell phone and they share it online if it's really creative. So figure 1% of people will do that if the ad is creative enough. And so basically it's the only ad format that's inherently viral. So your ads actually have to be good for people to do this. They have to be interesting. But if you do it well, if you browse social media, the only ads you'll see are pictures of billboards people take, whether it's like the 101, something in Vegas. It's like the only way that your brand can psyop itself into social media through ads. So
that's a great point. And in the place like, for example, Times Square, I remember the one that went viral was when you did for Pirate Wires, right? Make the Moon a State. And then in Las Vegas, obviously people are naturally actually just the camera's already out, right? Like they're in photo taking mode.
Yeah, Elon retweeted that one. So
massive.
For listeners who didn't see or don't watch Pirate Wires, we sponsored the show, and as part of our sponsorship, we needed to give them a piece of content to create. So we put the podcast, one of the slogans in Times Square, and of course the show host Mike Solana took a photo and he shared it online as people do. The other thing is in SaaS land, what's the image that is like the most marquee image of every startup? It's the big, NASDAQ screen that the company just went public, along with the pictures ringing the bell. So it's like these moments in time of a company's advertising. It's never a banner ad. That's so boring. It needs to be something in real life. It needs to have the team involved. It needs to, there's something special that happens when you integrate the online and offline worlds. And that's kind of like what we're doing by letting you buy billboards directly.
Well, two questions
from
actually.
Your cell phone. Yeah.
How much is the Times Square one? And how much would it cost for 30 minutes of my face in Times Square?
Yeah, I think you could do it for just under 10K. I don't want to make a promise to you, but probably like 8. We can get you up there for a little bit for Amazing. The day on rotation.
And then the second thing was in Las Vegas. I'm curious, like, do you have any really memorable out of homes other than the Sphere, obviously? Which, I mean, has anything gotten more earned media from out of home than the Sphere? Is anything even close to that?
It's a great question. I mean, really good campaigns do. If you recall, I mean, this was unfortunate timing, but I think there was that video game launch. I think it was Diablo in New York during the day.
Oh,
like, the
yeah.
City, and the billboard. Yeah, and the billboard for it like went live, and that image was like one of the most shared images I'd ever seen on social. So that was pretty memorable.
No, wait. So just for the listener, that was the day when there was fires in upstate New York, and basically New York looked like, if you were to say, it looked like hell. Was the whole point, right? It's like the Diablo billboard. Yeah, I actually remember that. I didn't realize it was that big.
Yeah, it can. Anytime. I mean, that's kind of a one-off thing, but really, anytime your company has either a new product launch or something mimetic that they could do out of home is just a great way to psyop it into the organic part of the internet, because no one's looking at ads online anymore. Honestly, like, when was the last time you bought anything from a display ad or a Facebook ad? I think they're kind of on the way out. Even like you really have to target well and have the right offer. And a lot of the other problem is, usually the only time I convert on online ads are remarketing. So if I'm on like 1-800-Flowers to buy my mother flowers for Mother's Day. I forget to check out. They remarket to me. I'm like, oh crap, I have to complete that purchase. And that's a pretty good ad experience online. But otherwise, I'm bullish out of home. I'm bullish podcast ad reads. I'm bullish ad formats that actually newsletter ads from like Beehive that are front and center above the fold when you read the actual newsletter, because the problem is in distribution. I think people are ad blind. People block ads. Everyone's watching Netflix and Amazon Prime without any ads. So like the thing that's become most important is actually getting them in front of people, and that's harder than advertisers think. I think a lot of advertisers are still living in this like this cable TV world, this sort of social media ad world, and I think it's just going away even more, especially with Zoomers. Like they don't want to see ads online. So yeah, I don't want to talk about out of home the whole time. We've got some other things coming up that I think will be exciting.
Fair. Yeah. All right.
So Trung, another post I wanted to discuss was, and we can be briefly on this, was the camera Vincent van Gogh in Starry Night. And so I guess AI and creativity is going to be this topic forever. I guess, what are your thoughts broadly for advertisers and just artists and creatives who are feeling anxious that AI is going to quote unquote replace them? I think it's a little, A, it's too soon for that, but B, I think like creative people with these tools are going to do great things, and it's just going to be another tool for them. So I understand there's this existential fear, but do you have any thoughts for, I guess, how this is happening today and what's going on, and maybe what plays out into the next like 10 years? Because you experiment with these tools all the time. You have a AI startup, Barely, so you're helping writers, and I think writers aren't as concerned. I think writers are like, oh, this is great as a research tool.
Yeah.
But like, I think there's some more anxiety broadly around like the visual creative artists here.
I think we're on the same page in a lot of ways, because I've read a lot of your hot takes articles. You've written a lot about this, and I think one that stands out is you've written about this idea of craft, right? And it's and it reminds me of something that I'd written in that article. So for the listeners, the article that Adam's referring to, I basically just talked about how the invention of the camera, which is also another technological shift in art, right, ultimately led to Van Gogh's Starry Night as kind of like this lesson of, if you can express yourself ultimately, there's very much a world, no matter what technology exists. A lot of differences between AI and cameras, to be sure, but the TLDR with the camera was, when it was invented in the mid 1800s, one of the primary jobs for a painter was to just paint people's portraits, to be as lifelike as possible. Immediately out of work. It's like, you're not going to outcompete a camera, right, to be a lifelike portrait. And when the camera was invented, particularly in Paris, where this is kind of ground zero for camera technology, a lot of these artists went out of work. I think at one point, 10% of the Parisian population in like 1850 got a portrait done by camera, which is pretty crazy when you think about it. And then that led, though, to like, the Impressionist movement, all these abstract movements where like painters like Monet and Manet, they would just, the whole point they'd realize was they were no longer responsible for creating the most lifelike image anymore. They could actually interpret things with their own subjective what they saw, what thought, which is why, like the Monet paintings, all his famous pawn ones, they're so trippy, right? He's showing how the light looked for him and how the color looked for him. It might not necessarily have been quote unquote the most realistic thing, but he was showing how he saw it. And that basically led to, if you look at the Starry Night as a painting, I'm sure every listener here is familiar with this, the second most visited painting in the world at the MoMA. It's not real, right? It's like Van Gogh had painted realistic night images before. It's like Paris Cafe is one of his other famous paintings. And if you look at Paris Cafe, the night sky looks quite realistic as how you might see it. But Starry Night is, it looks like he took acid, but he didn't, because he was at a mental institution recovering. And, obviously, sadly, this was like a year or two before he killed himself or self-inflicted gunshot wound. And but that painting, the whole point of that painting was very subjective. And that all came out because the camera allowed artists to experiment with new things. And he basically copied the Impressionists and the abstract painters. So fast forward Actually, let me pause on that. Did you have anything you want to add to that? Because I want to talk about some of your writing on top of it.
No, I love that story. And I think that, I mean, I think we'll get into this as we move from the old world to the new world. But
Yeah.
I think that you mentioned, I've written on this, is the importance of craft. And I think as long as you have craft, you can use any tools to create cool things. And it's like, I talk about these things at least through the lens of like my art form, music, at least when I'm blogging and not doing day job stuff. And honestly, for me, it's like a question of fun. It's like, yeah, I could use the AI to spit something out, but actually like touching a synthesizer, playing with, knobs and levers is just, it's more satisfying and fulfilling. And it's like, it's almost like, could I get the same output through a machine? Well, probably not anyway, because you can't describe sound with words and there's no like fine tuning of elements. But I think that there's like this, it's like microwaving a dinner, right? Like, would it feed you? Yes. Might it be satisfying? I don't know, maybe. But making something yourself is going to be like this unique thing that like is almost, it's different every time by necessity of you are not precisely the same with each meal that you cook. And so I think there's something special to that. It's like, you're not being reduced to the live in the pod and eat the bugs human where, every day is precisely regimented exactly the same. It's like, it's kind of like anti-human, like you wouldn't want to live like that. But with the same thing, like with that said, I use software to like make my art. So I'm not a Luddite. Like I like using tools, but just because like I'm given a new tool, like a microwave, I might use it just in like ways that they're not expecting, right? Like I'll use it in the way that I want, not the way that like, necessarily they're telling me.
No, I love it. That's what it is, right? These are like, to your initial question, is like, there is this kind of dread and fear. And listen, I mean, both of us, we compete with the outputs of these machines, right? And I think it goes to, here's my top level takeaway, and we can add the Starry Night story to it. Is like Starry Night people cared about because Van Gogh himself is a very interesting person, right? A very tragic person. And he left a lot of writings because he wrote to his brother Theo for decades. And those letters help build the lore of Van Gogh. So is he an incredible artist? Of course. Were there artists as good as him? There were. What made him stand out, right? Is like, I think his backstory is a big part of it. The context is the key word here, and has you kind of nailed it. Is you can microwave things and anyone can have outputs, but all that does is it commoditizes the actual output, right? People care about what is actually what is any single person's moat? What is the least commoditizable thing? It should be you as an individual, like your legitimate, unique, 100% what you grew up with, what you thought. No one's, it's corny, but everybody, the idea of everybody with different fingerprints is same with your personality. But the problem is that so much of corporate America is meant to flatten out your personality, right? Which is understandable from a industrial revolution, work 10 hours in the factory kind of mindset. But as we move up Maslow's hierarchy, self-expression kind of, it becomes a bit of a running joke, but that's the reality. Is like, when AI is commoditizing so much art, just actually the output of it, your only moat is yourself as an individual. So I think we both express this in our writing, is like, that you just have to express yourself more. That's what it is. But it is difficult for a lot of people because a lot of it's tied up in your ego. It's like, oh, if I say something that I believe, or if I talk about myself in this way and people reject it, that'll suck, right? And but that I think people have to get comfortable with, because otherwise you will get overrun by the AI slop, because it can do technically AI can do the technical job of outputting writing, visuals, or like you said, music, but your context is what makes a difference, and that's what people actually care about.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it's like, it's kind of a sad world if no one cares about the humans behind the work. And another interesting thing here is if you look at artists at the top of their game, think of Christopher Nolan in Tenet. He crashed a physical 747 into the side of a building, and he uses AGI, or not AGI, CGI in his work. And he chose for that scene. It either wasn't satisfying, or he's just like, look, this is gonna be so much cooler and more fun. But it's like, I think that the fact that these guys at the top of their game still want to do some things themselves. Not only is the story cool, but there's something human to that, to wanting to do something that's a little bit like, it's unpredictable. You don't know what's going to happen when the 747 crashes, and it's like, when it might be unpredictable what the prompt is, but it's like not like it's not like as chaotic as like what the real world entropy would be of crashing that. And I think we like that. I think we like the real world entropy of the creation. And to your point, we like the real world entropy of our stories, you know, whether they're tragic, whether they're hopeful, whether they're, you know, sad, whether no matter what they are, I think that's a part of it. And if you have no one in your life that you know that's creative and makes things, maybe that doesn't matter to you. You know, if you don't go to a local, you know, a local bar and listen to a local musician, or know like a guy who paints locally, or, you know, have pieces of art in your house from anyone you know, I can kind of understand how you might have that postmodern perspective of, oh, it's just the output, which some people do, but it's just kind of, it's kind of sad. I don't know how normalized that is. I think for people who are really interested in creativity, they like knowing the stories behind the humans. And I mean, how could that not be true? There's so many great biopics of, you know, musicians. We like to read biographies of interesting people. People like Robert Greene. This whole book is, you know, predicated
just snippets of biographies,
on people's lives. So I think, like, you know, there are the bugmen that only care about, you know, the soylent slop, but I don't know how many people actually want to live like that outside of, you know, the same people who, you know, want us all in casino, or want us all playing slot machines.
Slot machines with the perfectly bent screen so your eyes don't strain, which is, I already mentioned that part. But no, so Adam, the last thing I'll add on top of your point was, you said, like, you'd mentioned how you use software for your music. And similarly, I use a lot of AI for research, because it's an incredible researcher, right? Like, I'll give you a couple of things that I use AI for, and I'll preface with this: I'll never publish AI outputs under my own name. There's a few reasons why. One, it's the craft part. It's like, there's no reason. It's like we talk about fit. It's like getting liposuction versus earning your weight loss by actually running and feeling good, you know, and dieting and actually feeling good as a person, right? It's like, I would never use that from that perspective. But also, I'd never use an AI output under my name, because AIs are training on what you put under your name. So literally my existence in the future with these LLMs will be what I publish under my name. So if you're publishing AI work under your own name, all you're doing is turning yourself into the AI. Like, the LLMs in the future will only know you as basically whatever the outputs were, right? They actually won't, like, when my son in 30 years is like, oh, I wonder what my dad was like, you know, in the 2025, he can actually know, because I'm publishing under my name in 2025, and the LLMs are trained on that, right? So, but if I'm outputting ChatGPT text right now, it's wow, my dad sounds like Wikipedia, because that's literally a quarter of the training stuff for ChatGPT, right? So that's the philosophical reason why I never publish on my name. The other part, though, is I use a ton of it for research, and there's two main things I say I use AI for, and I do find it does help me a lot. Is it's so good at analogies and finding similar analogs in history, right? It's like, if you wanted, like, you know, when you're writing a story, it's always nice to have, like, oh, it reminds us of, like, this historical thing. Is just you know, analogies have a lot of weaknesses, but one of them is, like, the positive is it does help reframe for a lot of people that don't fully get it, especially if you're trying to describe a new or semi-complex topic. And they're really good at that. And the other thing I really use it for is edit. I don't have an editor, I don't necessarily take its edits. I'll take its grammar edits, but I'll actually ask it, is like, hey, can you critique this? It'll give me 5 critiques, and I'll just actually, anytime the critique is very spot on, it's like, oh, this sentence is running, I'm like, good, I'm going to keep that. I'm keeping that running sentence, because AI is the median writer, right? That's the median output of the entire corpus of mankind. I don't want to be the median writer. I'll take everything you're saying with this wrong thing, and I'm either going to lean into it or just keep it.
Yeah, I've used it as an editor, and I find it fucks up my voice sometimes. So if I'm gonna do that, what I do is the prompt I give is, you know, please edit this only for grammar and basic readability. And then at the end, I also say, please bullet point out everything you changed. And then you actually get, you know, it tells you what what it added. So you can be like, oh, okay, all this makes sense, versus if it tries to do anything that's like,
there's no big rewrites, right? It's literally just like changing the words, putting the semicolon here. And the other thing that's really great is you ask it to critique your thing, it'll give you the critique. And I typically find that 1 out of like 5 or 6 critiques, I'm like, oh, that's actually a valid critique. Or you say, can you argue against this thing? And it finds the weak spots, right? So you have to you add basically another paragraph to strengthen your case.
I have to say this, just, from the perspective of an observer, all of the AI critiques are always like center left coded. Like from like a political standpoint, it's just like everything is just center left coded. I think it's because of academia is all center left coded, but somehow and then you can force it to give a neutral critique, but it's just interesting because I write on politics on occasion. I actually don't take sides. I actually try and just observe, which annoys people more than taking sides sometimes. But anyway, it's really interesting how the AI is definitely like center left, like politically.
Oh yeah, 100%, man. It's the labs and I think the reality is the outputs, right? It's like if I think a fifth of it now is trained on Wikipedia, and obviously within the last 4 or 5 years, Wikipedia, quite frankly, has become a bit more politicized and probably closer.
Wikipedia and Reddit are there's a lot of activists
there. Well, you had a good Reddit piece.
I'm not saying you can't find good information there, but you need to just read the whole internet with your like PSYOP hat on and
no, actually what you just said though is actually specifically ask it for hey, listen, can you actually rebut this point that you just wrote out? And that's it, right? It's like it's one more level. It's not a big ask.
Yeah. So all right, Trung, I had a few other topics for you today. But do you want to pick one? Because I don't want to have you for like 2 hours. Do you want to talk about experts? Do you want to talk about online generalists, or do you want to talk about the art of the reverse take?
I want you. Which one are you the hottest on right now? Which one of you is in the hamper for you?
All right, we're gonna do 2, and the last one we'll just do quickly. But do you want to talk about? So I wrote down some notes on this. Because I would say you're an expert at a bunch of stuff.
Dude, definitely not an expert.
I feel like we're at this weird point where there's this whole debate on experts, and it's because our institutions definitely did some things to breach trust. I don't think that's a controversial thing at all, that some of our institutions have probably not been as vigilant around certain things. And so anyway, I feel like we've gotten to this point where it's like, I don't know, like peak expert hate, because there are actual experts in the world. I get it. Like the anti-expert thing is cool. And look, all of the university people are bad. And yes, a lot of them are bad, but have we gotten to this point where like we've gone too far? And it's kind of like, I don't know. I feel like I'm tired of all of the contrarian podcasters who just hate on academia, media, all of these things.
Dude,
all day.
I'm 100. I love that you brought this topic. I'm 100% on board with you. I think it's gone. It's full. It's peaked. It's like anti-expert stuff has. And again, to your point, I mean, we'll just do the simplest thing. At the start of COVID, everybody knows that this happened during COVID. Start of COVID, masks on the first week were bad for you. Should not wear masks. The next week, they were good for you, right? And if it came out that the reason why the CDC put that, this is in the United States, but WHO had something similar. The reason they said it that way is because they're afraid that the mask would run out. So they effectively lied. And to your point, the reason why that was so damaging, though, is because the institution of science was, people losing faith in politics. I think everybody can understand that. Politicians lie, they're cynical. People losing faith in academia, I think people can also understand that, in the sense of, there's some less rigorous topics. Like I was a history and sociology major. Like these are not objectively physics-based like answers, right or wrong, right? And then those can be abused. I think people get that. I think media, people totally get it, right? It's like New York Times had to apologize effectively for writing America into the Iraq War. The op-ed had this really famous op-ed in, I think, like 2005, and be like, oh yeah, sorry about the whole WMD stuff. Like turns out our writing on that wasn't accurate, right? They had to do that. It's like, so I understand a lot of these institutions started losing credibility. Last 4 or 5 years, science took a big hit. And it goes to your point, though, is like, but that put everybody on the same page, where the anti-expert totally, I think, peaked last year, where it's just like,
Yeah.
all right, we can't, if your reaction to experts is just knee jerk, they're wrong, that's almost as bad as like some of the crazy shit they're doing, right? It's like, all right, we got to actually, well, I can't believe I'm saying this word. I mean, we hate it. First principles. It's like, can we actually think about this stuff? It's like, can we think through this stuff and not just make our assessment, which is, to your point, just because an expert said it doesn't mean it's wrong, right?
Yeah,
That's where we got to.
I just think, yeah, there's this healthy balance between, questioning things, which is good, and then just sitting there asking questions about everything. Because what happens, and I think this is what what foreign adversaries who are engaged in psyops against us want, is us not to trust anything. Like, once they can get you to wholesale not trust our academic institutions, medical professionals, the aviation system, whatever. And there are reasons to ask questions, but you take it to this logical endpoint and no one trusts anyone, and then society falls apart. So I'd like to see us, maybe not be so mean to the expert class all the time. And maybe to the expert class, they shouldn't be pretentious, and take that as a lesson from COVID. And, that would be great. And we can move forward together.
Yeah, I think we're on the same page with this, man. Like, so peak, what was your term? Peak
anti-expert.
We've reached peak anti-expert. That's blog post for you right there.
Yeah, I think I'll write that one. All right. So one thing to end with, let's talk about you for a second. I feel like in this, there's both specialists and generalists. There's all this hyper specialization happening in modernity, but you're kind of this jack of all trades with writing, memes, business analysis, podcasting. What can you talk to maybe some of the young people out here on what are the sort of risks and rewards and benefits of being a polymath in the attention economy, and how that works for you, how you feel about it on a given day? Do you like doing a lot of different things? Do you wish you just did one thing? However you want to take this.
No, just I have to clarify. I didn't say polymath. That's Adam said that, and that does not apply to me. I think he's just using it as a general term. No, I'm saying is like, I think we're on the same page with this, because I've read your work on this, and it's like the only advice really, and I don't ever give advice, and I don't think I'm qualified to do it, is just, you should just be able to find on the specialist side, you should have a pointy skill, right? And you can apply that pointy skill to many different things. To your point of being a generalist, is like, I think something that I work on is being able to describe something in a very approachable and often with a sheen of humor manner, right? Like, that's kind of my MO. And I would say that's a pointy skill. That's probably the one that I'm unqualified to do 99.9% of the stuff in the workplace. But like the 0.1%, I think is I think I'm very good, or I think I work hard on that skill. And but to your point about being specialist versus generalist, is like, I think if you can develop one skill, which is a 99th percentile skill, you can point it at very many different problems, right? And that's how I'd square that circle. And but yeah, you got to have a pointy skill. I'd say that's something I certainly recommend for. I don't know the demographic breakdown of your listenership, but I think that's a very important thing. And that could be writing. It could be just being really good at getting attention, which is not necessarily the same as writing. It could be, to your point, it could be about making being good with audio, right? It's like some people are so good with the camera, or so good audio side, and then there's obviously the visual side where people are really good at communicating visually. Maybe you're a 99th percentile analyst, right? But yeah, the pointy skill allows you to be a generalist, and I think AI will actually, people that use AI well, you're just gonna get even pointier than most people, right? And will AI replace a lot of jobs? Of course it will, which you're even more, which why you really got to keep on getting pointy, right? Is like, and apply your own personal lessons into the skill that you're developing. I mean, how do you feel about that? It's like, do you believe somebody should find one skill specifically to become 99th percentile on, versus being really, or the Scott Adams version, right? It's like, get 70th percentile in 2 or 3 different skills. But I'd probably say that is more realistic.
No, that was a great answer. And I think that to your point about like, if you should specialize, I think as long as you specialize in something that is a timeless skill, agnostic of any technology, then you can apply it to your point. That's exactly what you were saying with humor, right? You're really good at humor and you can apply that anywhere. You're really good at business analysis and you can take that, you've developed the skills of writing, of audio storytelling. I actually am very impressed with your ability to not just write well, but speak well. I actually think it's really hard. I think people are biased to one or the other. I think I'm a much better writer. I'm still learning to be a podcaster. I think it's, a skill that takes, people unappreciate how hard Joe Rogan had to work and do like thousands of episodes to get really good at drawing out conversations in his guests. So I think you're right. Pick one thing, have that be your spiky point. And then I think once you do that, you sort of see how other skills are developed and you can accelerate your ability to learn them. Right. So, whatever that is, just get good enough at one thing to go through the process. And I think you're set up to do well in the future.
And I want to add something you've been saying earlier about the microwaving. This is where it gets with AI tools to be very careful not to allow that to short circuit the actual skill finding process, right? Is like, for example, for you could ask Suno to make you a song, but you should also know how that song is made, right? It's like you should go through the process of making it yourself at least a couple of times. Just an example.
Yeah, it's everything starts at paper and pencil, and if you can do things at the paper and pencil level, you're sort of trained for whatever happens at the digital level. I think I don't. It's like learning to fly a plane. They teach you to fly a Cessna before you fly a 747, and you want to start with basics. I think we would be remiss if we ever got away from that entirely. You'd end up in WALL-E.
Well, dude, Cessna, 747. There you go. That's an analogy that ChatGPT would have spat out. There you go. Use some AI for the analogies.
100%. All right, Trung. It has been awesome talking to you again. We'll put links to your Substack and to your podcast in the show description. But tell us where we can find you for people who are just listening. Trung.
Sorry, I think I got muted there. Do you want to edit that out and just hit it again on the conclusion?
Let's do it one more time. So, Trung, thank you for spending the time today. We will put links to connect with you in the show description to your podcast and to your Substack. But for anyone who's just listening, can you tell our audience where to go?
Yeah, Trung T Fan on X is probably the best. As Adam kind of alluded to, some really, really stupid memes, but I also try to throw in a little bit of education and things I find insightful in my daily readings. And Barely.ai is kind of the software I'm working on, a research app. But I appreciate it, man. This is round 3, though. We got to have Chris back. All right, so let's make sure that happens.
Yes, we will pull Chris from chief executive chair and get him back into the hot seat of the podcast.
Amazing, dude.
We will see you all again next week. Thank you for tuning in.